welcome to the deep dive. Today we're getting into something pretty surprising, actually. Legumes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, beans, lentils, peas, peanuts. These protein powerhouses are everywhere.
Absolutely essential globally.
Yeah.
But as we eat more of them, and especially in new form seedlings, flowers, we're seeing some complex allergic connections pop up.
Right, and that's our mission today. Our sources are digging into IgE-mediated legume allergies, focusing on how things like, environmental allergies, birch pollen is a big one here, can trigger these unexpected food allergies.
Yeah, and we're going to really zero in on the science behind a specific one, the mung bean allergen, VIG-R1. It's a fascinating case study.
Okay, but before we get to mung beans, let's set the stage. Legume allergy is, it's a big deal.
Right.
Especially for kids.
Hugely prevalent. But the sources make it really clear. Which legume causes problems varies a lot depending on where you are in the world.
How so?
Well, in Western countries, the US, Europe, it's mainly peanut and soy. Those are the dominant concerns.
Okay.
But you look towards the Mediterranean or India, and suddenly lentils and chickpeas become the main culprits.
Wow, that's a stark difference. What does that tell us?
It tells you it's not just about the proteins themselves. It's about exposure, what people eat regularly. It's about dietary habits, maybe genetics playing a role too. You tend to get sensitized to what's common in your diet.
Makes sense. Okay, so let's talk proteins. Because in allergy, I know that how stable a protein is, that's often a huge factor in how bad a reaction might be, right?
That's exactly the pivot point.
Yeah.
We basically divide these allergens into two main camps based on stability, how well they stand up to heat, acid, digestion, that kind of thing.
All right, let's start with the ones that cause the most concern, the heavy hitters.
Those would be your class 1 allergens. These are typically the plant storage proteins, things like 7S and 11S globulins, 2S albumins. You see them in peanuts. RH 1, 2, 3, 6 are classic examples.
And soy has them too.
Yep. So me MEM 5, 6, and 8 in soy. These are the ones built for the long haul.
What makes them so tough? Are they just designed to survive anything?
Pretty much. Their job in the seed is long-term energy storage, so they're naturally resistant to heat, acid, digestive enzymes like pepsin.
And because they survive the stomach.
Exactly. They reach the bloodstream more intact. That's why these class 1 guys are strongly linked to systemic reactions. Anaphylaxis, the really serious stuff.
Okay, scary stuff. Then there's the other group, the class 2s. This is where the pollen connection comes in, you said.
This is it. Class 2 allergens. These are often things called pathogenesis-related proteins, or PR proteins, specifically the PR10 family, and also profilins. The key difference, they're labile.
Labile meaning fragile, sensitive.
Yeah, sensitive to heat, sensitive to acid. They break down much more easily.
So if they break down in the stomach, the reaction is different.
Generally, yes. The reaction tends to be more localized. Think pollen food allergy syndrome, PFAS, or oral allergy syndrome, OAF.
The itchy mouth, throat, ears thing.
That's the classic presentation. The allergen often gets degraded before it can cause a widespread systemic problem, though there are exceptions, as we'll see.
Now, the sources also mentioned something interesting about having multiple allergies. It seems like if you're allergic to one legume, you're often allergic to others.
Very commonly. One study in kids found almost 60% had allergies to multiple legumes.
60%.
Yeah, and get this, over 90% also had allergies to totally different food groups. Tree nuts, egg, milk were common co-allergies.
Wow. So it points to a sort of general hyperallergic state.
Exactly, a high allergic background. The sources even suggest that being allergic to a less common legume, like, say, the common bean, might be a bit of a red flag for having an even stronger allergic tendency overall.
Okay, let's circle back to the class 2s and the pollen. How does that birch pollen connection actually work?
It's basically a case of mistaken identity by the immune system. Molecular mimicry, or cross-reactivity. The main birch pollen allergen, BET-V1, has a particular 3D structure. Your immune system learns to recognize and react to that structure.
Right, from breathing it in every spring.
Precisely. But then PR10 proteins in certain foods like gliamin-4 in soy or RH8 in peanut have a very, very similar structure.
So the immune system sees the soy protein, thinks it's birch pollen, And reacts.
You got it. The pollen exposure sensitizes you, primes the immune system, and then eating the structurally similar food protein triggers the allergic reaction.
Okay, now for that mung bean story, this sounds like a bit of detective work was involved.
It really was. Researchers were looking at patients who already knew they had birch pollen-related soy allergies.
Okay, established connection there.
Right. But these patients started reporting reactions after eating raw soybean seedlings, or so they thought.
Uh-oh, mislabeling.
Big time. Turns out what they were actually eating were mung bean seedlings Vigna radiata. Apparently, they were often mislabeled as soybean sprouts, especially in health food shops, and mung bean sprouts are getting pretty popular.
So this accidental exposure led to a discovery.
Led straight to identifying a brand new allergen. They named it VIG-R1.
VIG-R1, and it fits the pattern.
Perfectly. It's a PR10 protein, a BET-V1 homolog. When they tested these patients, 80% showed specific IgE antibodies against this new VIG-R1.
And looking closer at the molecular level, does it look like BET-V1?
The sequence similarity tells the story. VIG-R1 shares about 42.8% amino acid identity with BET-V1, which is significant in allergy terms.
Okay.
And crucially, it showed a really high similarity, 74.5%, with that soy allergen, Legume-4.
Which explains why the soy allergic patients reacted. It looks so similar.
Exactly. And when they analyzed extracts from the mung bean itself, VIG-R1 showed up as this characteristic double band on the gel, around 15 kilodaltons.
Is that typical for these PR10s?
Very typical signature. Mass spectrometry confirmed it was VIG-R1, likely multiple slightly different versions or isoforms.
Okay, but wait. You said class 2 usually causes mild OAS symptoms. Yet the sources mention these patients had itching, yes, but also throat tightness, nausea, heartburn. That sounds more severe.
That's a really important point, and it likely comes down to how they ate it raw.
So eating the raw seedling bypasses some of the breakdown.
It means the protein is hitting the mouth and throat completely intact, undenatured. Plus, the amount of allergen in those developing seedlings might have been quite high, enough to overwhelm local defenses and cause more severe symptoms like throat tightness before digestion really kicked in.
Right. Which brings us to another key finding. This VIG-R1 isn't just sitting there in the bean, is it? Its presence changes.
Totally dynamic. Unlike those stable class 1 storage proteins, VIG-R1 expression is tightly linked to the plant's development.
How so?
Well, the researchers found it was completely absent in the dry mung bean seed, and even in a tiny one-day-old seedling.
Not there at all.
Nope. But expression kicks in around day 4 and then increases as the seedling grows older.
And since people eat the seedlings.
That timing is critical. It explains why the raw sprouts cause reactions when maybe the cooked mature bean wouldn't, at least not via this specific allergen.
And you mentioned stress. Does stressing the plant make it worse?
It does. It confirms VIG-R1 is a pathogenesis-related protein likely involved in plant defense. When they simply stressed the seedlings, literally squeezed them gently with tweezers.
Okay.
The VIG-R1 levels clearly increased compared to unstressed seedlings. The plant ramps up production of these defense proteins when it feels threatened. Unfortunately for us, that means more allergen.
So raw, stressed seedlings are potentially the highest risk for this specific allergy. Okay, let's flip back to cooking then. We know raw is risky for these class 2s, but what about the class 1s, the stable ones? Does boiling beans or lentils actually help?
That's where it gets tricky, and it's a common misconception. You'd think boiling would solve it, right?
Yeah, seems logical.
But for those stable class 1 storage proteins, standard home boiling often does very little to reduce their ability to bind IgE and cause a reaction. Lentils, chickpeas, soy, they tested them.
So just boiling isn't enough denaturation.
Apparently not for these tough proteins. The sources suggest you need much more intense processing. High heat plus pressure, like autoclaving, that seemed to significantly reduce the IgE binding for lentil and chickpea allergens.
Autoclaving. Not exactly standard kitchen practice.
Not at all. And just to complicate things, there are these rare but documented cases. Kids reacting to cooked peas but being fine with raw ones.
Wait, heat made it worse.
It suggests that sometimes heat might actually change the protein structure in a way that exposes new allergenic parts. It's rare, but it happens. Cooking isn't always protective.
Okay, this is complex. Let's zoom out again. Beyond mung bean, what other cross-reactivity patterns did the sources highlight across the whole legume family?
We can kind of map out a few key networks, first sticking with that PR10 pollen-linked group.
The BET-V1 relatives.
Right. The cross-reactivity they saw with VIG-R1 also extended to Legume-4 in soy, as expected, but also to PRU-AV1.
PRU-AV1. That's cherry, isn't it?
No, That's the major cherry allergen. It really shows how these PR10 structures are conserved across different plant families, fruits, vegetables, legumes, panallergens.
But does everyone with a birch mung bean issue also react to cherry?
Interestingly, no. The study found a subgroup of patients who reacted to VIG-R1 but not PRU-AV1.
Why not?
It suggests that while the overall shape is similar, the specific bits the antibodies grab onto the epitopes can differ just enough between, say, a fruit PR10 and a legume PR10 to prevent cross-reaction in some people. It's not always a perfect match.
Okay. What about the class 1 storage proteins? Where's the biggest cross-reactivity risk there?
Globally, that's probably the peanut-lupine axis. Big risk there.
Peanut and lupine, why those two?
High sequence similarity. Lupine's main allergen, lupine-1, is structurally very close to peanut's RH1.
And lupine is used in food more now, right? Like flour.
Exactly. Used as a protein booster in baked goods, pastas sometimes. And the stats are significant. So something like 15-20% of people with peanut allergy are also sensitized to lupine.
Good to know. And what about that other cluster you mentioned earlier? Lentils, chickpeas, peas. The Mediterranean-Asian connection.
Yes, the Mediterranean cluster. Very high clinical cross-reactivity seen there.
Why are they so closely linked?
Shared storage proteins, again, specifically globulins. Things like LenC1 in lentils, PCS1 in peas, CK1 in chickpeas. They're all structurally related. One source said almost everyone in their study who was allergic to chickpea or pea was also allergic to lentils.
Wow, that's a tight connection.
Very tight. Suggests if you react to one in that group, the odds are high you'll react to the others.
And one last crucial point from the sources. It's not just about eating them, is it?
Absolutely not. We focus on ingestion, but inhalation is a real risk too.
Inhaling what? Cooking fumes, flour.
Both. There are reports of allergic reactions, rhinitis, asthma, even anaphylaxis just from inhaling steam while cooking legumes or from airborne flour dust. Lupine, lentils, soy, chickpeas, even raw green bean dust.
So the airways can be a route for triggering reactions too, even if sensitization happened through eating.
Correct. Fine protein particles in the air can be enough.
Yeah, okay, this has definitely been a deep dive. We've covered a lot the difference between stable class 1 and labile class 2 allergens.
That whole pollen connection via the PR10s.
The origin story of VIG-R1 in mung beans, how it changes with growth and stress.
And these broader cross-reactivity networks, peanut lupine, the lentil chickpea pea group, it's a complex web.
It really is. So what's the final thought to leave everyone with?
Well, think about this. We know cross-reactivity is all about similar protein structures. And we know VIG-R1 is highly similar not just to soy, but also to PR10s and other legumes we haven't focused on as much.
Like which ones?
Like yellow lupine, 65% identity, kidney bean, nearly 86% identity.
So it's likely.
It's highly probable, I'd say, that as diets keep changing, as we use more diverse legumes and different processing methods, we're going to start identifying more of these BET-V1-related allergies involving legumes that aren't currently considered major players. Kidney beans, other lupines, maybe others.
We're potentially just seeing the tip of the iceberg with mung bean.
Could be. This understanding of protein families and cross-reactivity is really key to staying ahead of the curve and anticipating what might come next.
A fascinating and slightly sobering thought. This knowledge is definitely crucial as our food landscape continues to evolve. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope this leaves you with plenty to think about.